back to Evil's Comics. I'm Evil Mike, or Mike if you prefer, and this is going to be my review on Alan Scott, The Green Lantern, issue number 1. It is written by Tim Sheridan, art by Cian Tormey, colors by Matt Herms, and letters by Lucas Gattoni. I'm sorry if I mispronounced any of those names. Before we get started on this review, please like, comment, subscribe on this guy's video. It does help. I'm trying to hit that 1K mark eventually. Hit that bell. You never know when I'm going to be dropping videos, but it will keep you in touch. So before we get started, I shouldn't have to do this, but I am going to do this. But it should come with a disclaimer. If you have a problem with gay sexuality or anything like that, this might not be the book for you. Alan Scott is a very known, gay celebrity within the DC universe, right? So if you have any problems with that issue, then you might want to click off this video. So with that being said, let's get into it. So it starts off with a bulletin page, and there's some stuff that I learned. I don't know a lot about Mr. Alan Scott besides the fact that he's the first Green Lantern, besides the fact that he is a gay character. He has a son who is dating another superhero. I know that. Draw a blank at their names, but I know it's Jade and somebody. Okay. So I did not know that he was placed in New York City. That's kind of a first for me. New York City being in, the DC world. Usually we hear the fictional places like Gotham, Metropolis, Star City, Coast City. So it does take place in New York City in 1941, and we're getting this news from a bulletin board, a paper, and it's talking about how Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, stopped Solomon Grundy. There's some other information that goes in there. Article about I seen the lights, how somebody mistaken something for seeing one thing, but it was really Green Lantern's light. But that's basically the gist of it. It kind of that showcasing that Green Lantern works by himself at this current point in time, kind of thing. We jump over and we actually see that Alan Scott is reading that paper, but he's not in New York. He's actually in D.C. in the Pentagon. He's talking to current FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. And Hoover, we come across this situation during this conversation, and he wants Alan Scott back with the JSA. Now, I'm not aware of this, but in this comic, they're stating that the FBI specifically set up the JSA, and they're mad that Alan Scott is not a part of their team. Hoover, he actually, asked Alan Scott to, be a member of the JSA, and Alan Scott declined. So at this point, he gives Alan Scott this file with his name on it, because at this point his identity is supposed to be secret. And basically we get this blackmail thing where he's, he shows him, a bunch of stuff that he knows, not only his real identity, but he knows his sexuality as well. Now, like I mentioned, this takes place in the 40s, right? So, homosexuality was not taken in a good light on any fashion. Now, it does state that Alan Scott was in the military. We jump over to the scene with, Alan and his and a lover, it looks like, and I'm meeting this guy, and for the first time, but his name is Johnny, and I want to say it's Johnny Vlads, but don't quote me on the last name. Basically, they're in the military. They're talking about a top secret program that they're both assigned to join. It's actually called the Crimson Fire program. But they're about to go on leave together, and it's there's a lot that goes into this conversation besides the romantic embrace, and it's really that they have to be careful, hiding, especially in the military kind of thing. So we go forward, and they kind of get more into this Crimson Fire program that they're into, and they've heard that there's some some legend, myth about a Crimson Fire that's out on the Russian waters, and they're taking a ship. They built a machine that supposedly, it's going to capture some of this fire or all of this fire, and there's covertly they're gonna, go out there, get the fire, and make it back to America before anybody or anything knows the wiser, kind of thing. And at this point, it just kind of, touches base on just different stuff, But basically, this is, Scott and his lover, and they're taking that moment, but it's the moment when they finally come upon the Crimson Fire, kind of thing. It being now more than a myth, than a legend, kind of thing. We have this moment over here with Alan Scott and a trusted individual. I don't know his name, but could be like a butler, a helper that's not really gone into. But it's a conversation about like Alan Scott joining the JSA, and him being blackmailed by Hoover and his friend, the helper. That's where I'm going to title. He doesn't really like. And I think this guy's name is Derby, but he doesn't really see the problem of making a JSA kind of appearance every now and then. He doesn't see it being that bad, kind of thing, and that's where he leaves off, because before they can get going, Alan Scott is called into action because he hears like some commotion, some police sirens, going by. We see something that I didn't know about Alan Scott, but his power has the ability where he can go through walls. That's new for me. Again, I'm not very acquainted with this character at all, but he is shown, right here going through the wall. His costume forming I thought was really cool, because unlike the other Green Lanterns, theirs is all a construct kind of thing. We jump back over, and it's basically, them getting ready and enhanced, to catch this Crimson Fire with the ship. That there's a couple moments with him and his dude Johnny, and that there's there's a ring that was given to Johnny, from Johnny to Alan, to kind of commemorate their lives together, because they can't really get married, right? It's not, and there's this whole conversation about like how Alan Scott feels guilty. It's one of the reasons he doesn't want to join the JSA, because he feels like he's a criminal or a villain himself for committing such sins, but just the sin of homosexuality, kind of thing. He's such a hero that he sees that, that he's evading the law, kind of thing, and that design, that he feels like he's a villain. So we're up at the time when they're going to capture the Crimson Flame, and at this time, it's talked about the Crimson Flame as being in, they didn't know it at the time, but it's seen as having intelligence, and they eventually do capture it, and as soon as they capture it, it eventually gets mad and tries to kill the ship, and it capsizes it, leaving Johnny and Alan Scott in dire, peril, kind of thing. We jump back over to Alan Scott and this whole like rescue mission and stuff, and we see it's a bank robbery, but supposedly Alan Scott has already gotten there and taken the robber away. Alan Scott's very confused. He doesn't understand how it's happened. Eventually we see this like meteor that or fireball that appears out of nowhere. Alan Scott jumps into action to go, stop this whole meteor. We get this flip-floppy situation where we're going back and forth, but basically at this time Alan Scott kind of figures out how to save everybody. Alan Scott goes up towards the fireball. He ends up blasting it. It dissipates. We see that in a flash that that the meteor was headed towards a building, and Jake Garrick shows up to evacuate everybody, but we'll catch up with him in a second. But Alan Scott is successful in making the fireball disperse. Let's just say that. And we kind of see where the fireball came from, and it was this or that's what the book's leading to. I don't know that for sure, but this body over here on this rooftop, and Alan kind of sees it in the back of his eye, kind of thing. So we jump back over to the ship, and the plan is to jettison the Crimson Fire. back into the ocean, and it will propel the ship, and it does, because we find out that Alan Scott is an engineer. Another thing I did not know. But it does end up, fixing everything. At this time, Alan mentions that, Johnny's like, oh, we lost everything. Crimson Fire, the thing that we spent like 2 years, trying to get. Alan is not convinced that they have lost that, and so they stick around trying to do it once more. And as you can see, the Crimson Fire ends up grabbing his lover, Johnny. And we cut back over. We meet back up with Jay Garrick, the Flash and everything, and now Alan Scott has brought that body from the building, and there's a couple things that we learned, that Jay Garrick is kind of weirded out that this was found on top of the building because it looks like he was drowned but also burned at the same time. When this is said, Alan he is stuck in like shock mode and stuff, and at this point you're kind of guessing why. They're going back to that moment on the ship, Johnny being pulled in the water by this Crimson Fire, and that's exactly what this body looks like. It looks like that this is that dude from 1941 that got taken by the Crimson Fire and possibly drowned, kind of thing. Alan Scott says that during this moment of shock of him seeing that body, that this was, he swear he heard this, creepy thing being uttered, and it says, first we bring death, and he is instantly reminded of that at this moment. But then we jump to a whole nother part in the story, and we find out that all this is like being told in his head from a very future point. And this is the last page of the book, but it looks like our dude Alan Scott is in a mental hospital, kind of reflecting on maybe the things that went wrong in his life, kind of thing. But that's where this issue leaves off. And that is my review on Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, issue number 1. Please let me know down below anything you know about Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, because I know nothing, and without physically having to go onto Google and cheat and look it up. Okay, so my thoughts, I love it. It was a little non-linear, and I'm a little confused about some things, but I'm pretty sure I thought the Crimson Fire, wasn't that the Green Lantern's bad guy? Isn't that a dude? Like, but maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe that's the Crimson something, the Crimson Ring, or the Red Lantern, or I don't know. Don't quote me. I know very little about this, but for first issue, it was great. The art was fantastic. The setup, the story moments, the lover moments between Johnny and Alan were pretty fantastic, if I'd have to say so myself. But I really enjoyed this first issue. Let me know down below what you thought. That's my review. I'll let you go. Bye.